You might have heard a thing when looking into the culture of modern day Japan of the fact that Japan has a lot of perks and quality of life things that perhaps other countries in the West don't necessarily live up to. Like, you can be in Japan for 5 minutes walking around any major city and notice a couple of things like, oh wow, there's hardly any rubbish on the ground. Well, culturally speaking, Japan is a country that values its cleanliness and not being a total tool and just trashing the place. So everybody takes their rubbish either to a designated bin or they just take it home and throw it away on their own. And another element you might have heard a lot of people talking about is, hey, I don't know if this is just me, but there is very few homeless people in Japan. And at one glance, you might look online and see articles like this and think, oh wow, Japan is like, must be a utopia, must be really great, considering the fact that apparently, according to a government study just last year in 2023, they found out that only 3,065 homeless people exist in the entirety of the country. That's pretty impressive considering the fact that the country itself has 125 million people who live in it. That's like 0.01% of the population, something ridiculous like that. Which again is an impressive statistic when, for example, you look at, say, the United States, where it says here that in 2023, roughly 653,000 people in the US experienced homelessness, up about 12% from 2022, which is about 11.5% roughly of the population. And here's the thing, like, when I was looking into it as well, because I got curious about it as someone who likes, keeping up with how the modern day society of the country I live in operates, and the fact that I talk about a lot of Japanese cultural stuff on this channel, I wanted to look into it as well. Like, yeah, it is true, there are very few homeless people. Not to say that there's zero, I definitely seen them around and stuff like that, but is this actually true? Like, are we getting to the point now in Japan where homelessness is just something that will soon just be completely non-existent? Will it actually ever reach 0%? Well, it turns out that the situation of homeless people in Japan actually isn't as utopian as a lot of these governments are making them out to be. For example, if we go back to this Japan Today article, they actually look into the fact that, hey, the way that these numbers were calculated, this supposed 3,000 homeless people were calculated, might be a little bit skewed. So we can look at it from this paragraph onwards. It says, on the surface, this would be a plaudibly low homelessness rate given Japan's current total population. However, aspects of how the study was performed may have resulted in lower figures than the actual reality of the situation. Well, how is that the case? Let's find out. First is the study's focus on parks and riverside areas. It is true that in Japan, the vast majority of homeless people spend their nights sleeping in parks and undeveloped riverside areas. Compared to many other countries, the portion of homeless people literally sleeping on the streets, sidewalks, or in storefronts in Japan is very small. And that is true. If you, again, go to anywhere in Tokyo, it's very rare that you will just see a homeless person sitting there in front of a store or on the main road. They are kind of far away from where most people, or most tourists especially, will see them. That said, it's not as if there are absolutely no Japanese homeless people in purely urban environments, especially during the day. So not including such areas in the study would mean at least some level of underreporting. Second is the method by which the numbers were collected for parks and riversides. Local government workers visited the sites in their territories and reported the number of homeless people they saw there. So any homeless person out of sight or out of the park at the time of the site's visit was not included in the tally, which is like... which is like kind of fucked up if you think about it, right? It's like, oh, we found a homeless tent, no one here. I guess there's no homeless person here then. All right, don't include that in the tally, Tanaka. He's not here. Which might have resulted in the whole there are only 3,000 homeless people in Japan thing. But the thing is that nowadays, especially in Japan, there is actually a whole other crisis that is happening, which is actually resulting in a completely different demographic slowly becoming homeless. And that is actually kids in Japan. unfortunately. The Japan Times here did an article talking about Japan seeing a record number of domestic violence consultations amid the pandemic. It says here that police revealed over 83,000 consultation requests regarding domestic violence in 2021, a record high number for at least the past 2 decades. The number, up 399 from the previous year, is the highest since a law against spousal violence took effect in 2001. By age, 26.4% were in their 30s and those in their 20s and 40s, each accounting for more than 20%. Now, this particular article here is talking about spousal domestic violence, which obviously is absolutely fucking horrible. And any man or even woman who does any of that kind of stuff absolutely deserves to rot in hell. But it's not only adults who are getting affected by this, it is also children who are getting affected by it from terrible parenting. And there is a word that they use in Japanese nowadays that is pointing towards these supposed homeless kids who most of the time are being affected by this domestic violence that they see in their household. They're called toyoko kids. To and Yoko, to coming from Tokyo and Yoko coming from Yokohama, which are the two biggest metropolitan areas in all of Japan. And according to this article, the whole Toyoko problem has been existing now for the past 5 years or so. So this is not necessarily a relatively new thing. I mean, I guess in the grander scheme of things, it is a relatively new modern problem that Japanese society is going through. But it seems that there are a lot of children, some ranging from as young as 14 years old, according to this particular study, who essentially are having problems in their household, whether it be through domestic violence or other situations that make the child feel very unsafe in their own home, and so they basically have nowhere else to go. For example, the Yahoo News article here that I'm looking at, by the way, all the articles are linked down in the description below if you'd like to check it out. But for example, with this one, there is a Toyoko girl last year in December who is 14 years old, who basically said that their parents are going to a psychiatric ward and constantly always give, attention to the older sister. And so she doesn't particularly feel safe or doesn't feel like wanting to go home. And of course, because these children are still children, they're still students, they're not legally not allowed to work or, even go and do some like part-time jobs or like a convenience store or a fast food place or anything like that. They're basically kind of left in this limbo state of not necessarily being homeless, but kind of homeless by choice due to unprecedented circumstances that are happening in their own home. And, obviously this can lead towards, and a lot of people have speculated that this is kind of leading towards the whole rise in domestic violence cases in Japan. A lot of it's not just adults, again, that are being, treated terribly and being forced out of their homes or even worse, God forbid, but it's also children and parents doing the whole domestic abusing thing, which I don't think you need me to say or explain to you straight up is a fucking terrible thing. And of course, the biggest problem as well with all of this kind of stuff is the fact that a lot of the police force in Japan who, for example, go out into places like Shinjuku, parts of Tokyo, parts of Yokohama late at night and see what is clearly a young child, man or woman, just out at night, not being at home, they will approach these kids and go, hey, you should be home. What are you doing out in the streets? You should be at home right now. And no matter how much these kids try to explain to a police officer of, oh, well, I don't want to go home, the police, unfortunately, it's not the police's problem. It's considered a private dispute in the home, which is like, again, kind of turning a blind eye towards the whole thing. Like, for example, there is an example here of a 17-year-old girl who for 2 years now has been kind of spending her time in the Toyoko area and being referenced as a Toyoko child, who basically says here that I've been stopped by the police more than 10 times over this period, but every single time I've gone back to the Toyoko area. I've gone in the homeless route, because if I stay at home, then there'll be, situations where the mother will, abuse me. The mother will kind of lock me up and try to feed me psychiatric medicine and stuff like that, even though there's nothing wrong with me particularly. Basically, it's a very hostile environment for these children in their own homes. And so they feel like they have no place of belonging. They've lost their place in belonging, which is a fucking terrible thing, obviously. There's so few children in Japan right now because of the declining birth population that, the children that do exist in this day and age should be protected, should be taken care of. And this entire problem, honestly, is just like a snowball effect of so many other problems that Japan currently has right now. One being the fact that amongst a lot of Japanese youths and in Japanese society in general, the idea of mental health awareness is just pretty much non-existent. I mean, it's getting a lot better from at least how I am seeing it, personally speaking. I don't know how it is statistically, but from how I am seeing it and from what I'm hearing around the block and from all the articles that I read online, the, I guess, whole idea of mental health awareness is becoming a lot more acceptable, where younger people who are anxious, who are depressed, who are suicidal, they have not only facilities that can help them to get better, and the whole stigma of taking things like antidepressants is becoming a lot less stigmatized in, as a way of escape, which is the most absurd way that you could think about mental health. But it's also the fact that, again, there are so many issues now of these domestic abuse claims and of children who are essentially getting thrown out of their own homes, out of their volition, and basically because of the fact that, again, they have no place of belonging. Obviously, this is a whole developing thing right now, and I'm still doing research into it. I don't know, I might make like a full video on my main channel about it, but I just wanted to quickly bring it up in a kind of more casual video like this, on this channel, because I do think that this is one of the very few, or rather the few problems that are happening in modern day Japan right now that people are really not talking about, and it's really unfortunate. And the fact that this issue is a direct result of another issue, which is a direct result of another issue, and the whole thing just keeps snowballing, and yet governments and local authorities and stuff like that are kind of turning a blind eye to it because, oh, it's not their problem. They're just young. They'll get over it. It's probably a phase, is the most irresponsible thing that not only a government and a local enforcement can do, but just something that an adult should think. Like, shouldn't we be, like, protecting our children? Like, shouldn't we be protecting the youths that are going to help us to move the country forward and move the culture forward? I don't know. Maybe that's not on Japan's agenda right now. Maybe they're just too concerned of the whole tourism problem and the whole immigration problem and every other problem that Japan has been, quietly sweeping under the rug to make sure that the rest of the world doesn't know about it. But hey, unfortunately, they've got someone like me who is not afraid to pull the dust from under the rug and show you the unfortunate, ugly side to a country that is viewed by many people as a utopian society. Because newsflash, no such thing as a utopian society. Unfortunately, there's a lot, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of amazing fucking things I love about Japan, and so many great things about visiting Japan and living in Japan, stuff like that too. But I think it's also important to talk about these kinds of very serious issues that are happening culturally, even though you might not necessarily be part of that culture. You might not necessarily be part of the country. You might not necessarily be someone who lives there or has friends there or anything, because this is the kind of issue that definitely other cultures have, definitely other countries have, and I think it's very important to talk about to move forward as a society. So yeah, if I find any more updates, any more information on it, and I feel very strongly towards it at this point already, but the more I find, the more I'm inclined to actually do like a proper main channel kind of documentary style video on it as well. And of course, I'm not the only one talking about this. There are plenty of other people online, especially here on YouTube, that are making videos on it and stuff like that. So yeah, if you're interested in that, obviously go and check those out. Go and do some research in your own time. But that's pretty much it for this video. That's just something I wanted to cover. Sorry, this one is a pretty downer video. But again, I thought it was very important to talk about and at least let you guys know. And of course, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions about anything I said down in the comments below as well. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, smack my face right here, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger. Over here next to my head is a couple more videos you can check out. If you enjoyed this one, links to my social media, as well as my Patreon to support me directly, and Nonsense, my clothing brand, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.